You two? Anybody else?
Oh, we're not good enough for you?
The Jedi Council?
They're gone.
So I'm all you've got.
Captain, set a course for Bogano.
Mama always said, gaming is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. Welcome to the swamp, where it's what's under the water that really matters. Today I take a look at Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It came out November 15th for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and the Windows platforms. Fallen Order is developed by Respawn Entertainment, which you might remember them for games like Titanfall 1 and 2, Apex, and it's also published by Electronic Arts. Before I get started, I do want to point out that I will be showing some of the planets and discussing a little bit of the story. I'll try to keep those as spoiler-free as possible, but if you are very sensitive to those kind of things, I would suggest clicking away now. So, if you take a pinch of Dark Souls, a smidge of Sekiro, and a dash of Bloodborne with a sprinkle of Star Wars Force Unleashed, boom, you have Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. All those games mentioned have some influence on the Fallen Order in some way. At times while playing, I couldn't help but think that games like Tomb Raider, the Uncharted series, and the older God of War games had some kind of presence. I'll explain those later, but you may be asking, that's great and all, but what is the Fallen Order?
Yeah.
So you're asking, what is the Fallen Order? Well, the Fallen Order is an action-adventure Star Wars game. It's kind of like the Force Unleashed with a lot of the things that I mentioned with the games above. It's set 5 years after Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and 14 years before Episode 4, A New Hope. It follows a new protagonist, which is Jedi Padawan Cal. He's played by actor Cameron Monaghan, and he's being hunted by the Galactic Empire. You may have recognized Cameron from TV series Shameless, and also he starred in Gotham and a plethora of other shows as well. So first up, I want to talk about gameplay. So you heard me mention earlier that the Fallen Order has similarities of other games. Well, I found it to play more like a combination of Sekiro with the way that you block, but it's not as punishing. And of course, Bloodborne in the way that if you die, you lose all of your skill points that you've built up. And the only way to really retrieve those is to go back and find the enemy that killed you and strike them. Upon striking and not actually killing them, you get those points back, which was similar but different than Bloodborne in the sense that in Bloodborne, you actually had to kill the enemy that killed you. Fighting is done in a very basic way of smashing the X and Y button on the controller and either timing to block or parry or counter and or deflect blaster bolts, or holding block to provide a constant block. You can also dodge, which I found that to be very useful. As you progress through the game, you will unlock a variety of skills via a skill tree that's kind of reminiscent of Assassin's Creed Odyssey's skill tree, or Origins in that matter. It focuses on three main aspects of the Force, the lightsaber, and survival. Each area does expand as you progress, unlocking more skills that you can invest in as you progress through the game. Throughout the game, there are hidden secrets, some of which are stem upgrades that give you the ability to heal. Think of these like Estus Flask in Dark Souls. I would highly recommend you finding these as they do help. Save spots are represented via like a meditation circle on the ground, aka bonfires for the Souls fans that are out there. They are found throughout each open hub area on each world. There are more than one, and I found that they were spread out pretty evenly, and I didn't run into like too many issues of having to backtrack a lot if I did die. But I also want to take note here that there is no fast travel. So if you're looking for a way to actually fast travel throughout the game, it does not have it. Speaking of, an open hub and not an open world, the games, it's kind of set up in a method or a way of that each area is more of a large open hub, more so than an open world, even though you travel to different worlds. And there are 5 different worlds that you will travel to. So while I did like that aspect, I wish that I guess we could have visited more areas within each world that you went to. Because when you visit these worlds, each world only has really one area. And so I thought that they could have done a little bit more in that sense, to where they could have opened it up, and maybe they'll do that later with some DLC. But I really felt like there could have been some room for improvement of, you got this whole massive world, but you're only visiting one area within that world. There's, a good mixed combat and platforming and puzzle solving in the game. And, I really felt like in that regard, they took cues from games like Tomb Raider and Uncharted. And those games I really, really enjoyed. In some cases, places that, you will come across early on, they can't be accessed. You'll have to return later after you get skills in order to maybe open a block path or push, something over. But in essence, there is a lot of backtracking that you will have to do if you want to try to platinum this game and find all the loot that there is to find. The game does have good replayability in that sense, especially if you're someone who does enjoy looking around for loot and trying to find it in every little nook and cranny. Felt the developers did a really good job of hiding that stuff. Speaking of, the loot that you do find in the game, the majority of it is, cosmetic upgrades, and most everything that you find will be a cosmetic upgrade for, like, Cal's shirt, his tunic, the ship's color, BD's color. And of course, you have, lightsaber upgrades, and those are cosmetic as well. There are specific upgrades that do pertain specifically to BD that do allow him to do different things that do help you, throughout the game. But for the most part, most of the things that you will be picking up or coming across is going to be cosmetic upgrades. And then you do come across fallen soldiers on the field, if you will, that are strategically placed. And as you come across those, they kind of offer that Dark Souls aspect of giving you experience points that might be reminiscent of something you would find in a Dark Souls, type of game. The story does have story-based bosses, and there are hidden bosses in the game. And of course, I'll leave it at that so that nothing is spoiled. Each hub area does have shortcuts that you can unlock, and I felt that they were placed in appropriate areas. It's always nice to see that door that wouldn't open 30 minutes earlier can now be accessed by some simple task. And then, of course, when you step through them for that first time, you get this like, oh, wow, that's where this door leads to. To me, that was a feeling that never really got old. I did encounter some technical issues in certain areas when opening doors or maybe hanging from a pipe. The game would tend to hang. Sometimes it would judder or freeze up for a bit. But it only happened, let's say, a handful of times. And hopefully these things, can be fixed in the future with patches. So up next, I want to talk about graphics. I felt the graphics were beautifully done in the game. Each world felt like its own place, and it had its own distinctive character and or environment. Nothing really looked out of place, and I truly felt as I was playing the game that I was inside a Star Wars world or environment. Each NPC or animal or enemy was well crafted. The water looked as if water should, and the snow looked as if snow should. At times I noticed you could leave like footprint tracks on the ground, which was a nice touch. The Saber's glow looked as it should. I believe that originally there were some complaints in that regard. And so the developers went back to the drawing board and then, of course, made some adjustments to how the lightsaber did look, or the glow to it. You'll notice as you hit walls or hit enemies throughout the game, it will leave, singe marks, which I really enjoyed. One of the things I do want to point out is, as far as the saber, and when you fight humans, you can't decapitate them. You can't sever off limbs. That's something that they made very upfront from the beginning. You can do certain enemies, like more or less the animal enemies. There are times to where you can decapitate or sever body parts. So you will run into that, and you'll come across those as you do finishing moves on them, which is really cool. I actually thought that was really, really neat. So ultimately, there's no Quentin Tarantino going on here. I will say that one of the things that was a little bit odd graphically would be the Wookiees when you do come across them. I felt they struggled a bit in that area. The models looked just odd. They seemed a bit overstretched, and I don't know. It just they seemed a little bit off to me. But aside from that, graphically, they did a really, really, really good job on it. And of course, that brings us to the game music and sound effects. This was part of the game that I really, really, really enjoyed. I can't emphasize that enough. The sabers clashing sounded wonderful. Or just listening to the stormtroopers as you encounter them. They'll start talking smack, and then of course you proceed to force push them off a cliff or slice off some of their backside. I always thought that was really fun. But just the sounds that were implemented in the game, I felt they did a great job. The music score, I'll be honest, I mean, it's awesome. It sounded as if John Williams was right there, blowing your eardrums out. I mean, my blood started pumping as soon as the battle commenced and the music started piping in. It was just awesome. I mean, the best way I could actually describe that type of feeling would be listening to John Williams' Duel of the Fates while partaking into an epic saber battle with 10 stormtroopers shooting at you while 2 different animal enemies are eating each other. And yes, you can sit back and actually watch the stormtroopers or fight the enemies. They'll battle each other in the game, and that kind of makes for some really cool moments when you do encounter those. So overall, the music was probably one of the best parts of the game. When I talk about sound in a game, some of the extra details that the developers added to sound that I currently hear when playing the game would be like wind howling as it's blowing over a cliff. And you'll notice this when you get to Bogano. As I'm standing here and just listening to the game, I hear like birds chirping, and there isn't just one bird, it's several different types of birds that you'll hear. And there's it's like you can hear groups of birds, single birds, and like I said, it's just a different variety. I hear what sounds like crickets in the grass. So you have all these things going on, included with the details to the dust particles and grass blowing around, that really adds that extra immersion that I mentioned earlier, which is just really, really, really cool. One of the other things, and I really love details in games, so one of the things that I thought was really cool, especially like on Bogano, and you'll find this throughout the game, is like you'll see little particle effects that will float around in the air. You'll see little bugs, and it looks like maybe some dragonflies, things like that. So it just adds so much more immersion to the game. When playing on Bogano and you're looking over a cliff, you can see like fog kind of dancing around the grass in the background, and then over the cliff, it appears like it's just the wind's kind of catching it as something you might, really see in life, and it's kind of blowing it off. And then you have like the God ray effects coming down, kind of leaves a little glare predicated on your camera position. So it's the little touches to detail I find really, really good. I thought the facial animations that were done by the characters were well done, aside from the Wookiees, which I'd mentioned. But other than that, I mean, it's just one of those things to where the little details in the game really, really provides that extra level of immersion that I so do enjoy. And I think that once you get into the game and you play it, you will too. One of the things I do want to touch on briefly is if you're familiar with Dark Souls, then you'll be familiar with the fact that anytime you rest at a bonfire, your enemies will reset and respawn in that area. And I know that there's been a little bit of criticism with this feature that's currently in this game. And I personally didn't mind it because it gives you the opportunity to level yourself up and get more skill points based on the experience that you gain by resetting your world. So by doing this, you actually reset all of your enemy spawns, and you also reset your health. So if you didn't have any stems left and you were down to, let's say, 1 or none, you hit the rest button and you rest, and effectively it resets everything. And it gives you that ability to get your stems, your health, and go back and then level up if you choose to do so. Obviously, I say obviously, you don't have to do that if you don't want. You can actually sit at the bonfire, upgrade your skills if you choose to do that. And there were times that I made that choice just due to the fact that I didn't want to fight maybe enemies at that specific time and moment. So there's always that option as well, predicated on the current situation that you may be facing. So just something to keep in mind. And of course, that brings me to fun factor. I generally rate my games on fun factor, and listen, there's no guessing game here. I really enjoyed this game. You know, aside from the few bugs that I mentioned and the lack of being able to explore more places within one world, and of course, you know, the Wookiee character model being a little off, the game is definitely a buy, even at full price. If you have the money, I really recommend getting this game. If you enjoy a Star Wars type of game, and obviously some of the games that I had mentioned earlier, it's awesome. I mean, I sat down and played straight through the game, and sometimes that's really hard for me to do, but when I do, I know that it's usually one of those games that I really, really, really enjoy. I spent 25 plus hours just playing this, and that's not even a completionist. I mean, that's, you know, going through doing the basic search here, look here, spending a little bit of time, you know, trying to loot, because I do enjoy looting in games, but then seeking out, finding all of the story bosses, obviously, and then the hidden bosses, and then fighting those. And then, of course, making my way through the game. So you could literally spend probably about 30 plus hours in the game just looking around and trying to find all the extra little content. So, again, if you enjoy a Star Wars game and you enjoy, you know, the upgrades that, like I mentioned, are cosmetic, I do want to point out I wish they could have done a little bit more there, but I certainly understand why they went that direction. And when I say a little bit more, I kind of would have liked to have seen upgrades actually affect the lightsaber in more than just a cosmetic aspect. But again, that's probably just me being more a little nitpicky and something on my wish list. But you know, if you enjoy Star Wars, I'd certainly get this game. I will say that while this is a Jedi-only experience, I would love to see a Sith experience in the future. I do hope the developers go back and go, you know what, we did the Jedi, let's do a Sith type game and see where that takes us. But anyway, I really hope that there's some DLC, and we'll see where this game takes us in the future. That's it for me. Until next time, may the force of gaming be with you. You guys peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.